Okay, so in the last part we created a nice animation for our check mark. So now it kind of appears, it appears to be drawn, and then it has a cool bounce effect. Now one thing I noticed with the SVG of the check mark is that it's a little bit, I don't know, the two lines do not connect very nicely, and it gets more obvious when we scale this up. So if we make the check mark really big, you can see that here the transition between those two lines is not very clean. So I've been looking into what the problem could be, and there's actually two parts to this. So one thing is we set the stroke line cap, which makes the ends of all lines rounded, but there's also a thing called stroke line join, and it does the same thing, but it does it for the points where two lines are joined. So when we do this, we will see that it looks already a bit nicer. But now I think the bend is not really great. So the thing I found while messing around with it is that it just needs a very small correction to fix this. So if we just move the control point, this is the first control point of this bend, a tiny little bit to the left, then our result is a lot cleaner. So let's zoom this in to see that. There you go, so that looks a bit nicer. Okay, so this time we're gonna add some JavaScript animations. Last time we did keyframe animations with CSS, and now I want to focus on two techniques. One is how to make an object follow a SVG path, and the way to do that is with JavaScript. So the first thing is we'll add a circle to our SVG. And a circle has different properties. It has an X and Y position and a radius. But the radius and the X and Y position, we will get to that in the JavaScript. I could put it this animation in the same click event, but I'm just going to create a different function for now. So what we need next is a bit of JavaScript to animate this. So first things first, we will need a reference. I'm gonna add those references here, I think. Let's see, I'll just add them here. So we will need some references to some elements. So the first thing is, let's reference the SVG. So we can do that by a checkbox wrapper and select the SVG inside this wrapper. And we also want a reference to the path. So we can do that by checking for the path inside this SVG. And the last part is the circle itself. So let's also select that one. So now we have our references to our SVG, our path, and our circle. So the first thing I want to do is there's two functions that are really useful when dealing with this sort of animation. The first one is path dot, well, let's total length is path dot get total length. So what this does is it gets the length of this path in viewbox terms. So it's not in pixels or anything. So if we scale this up, the length will actually stay the same. So it's more in viewbox terms. So we have the total length, and now we want to divide this path into a number of intermediary steps, so into keyframes. So let's say we want 10 steps. So, and now we can calculate our step size because we know the total length of our path and we know the number of steps. So if we divide those two, we get a step size that we will take. So our step size is equal to our total length divided by our number of steps. And now we can create keyframes for those steps. So what we are going to do is we need to create just an array with 10 elements in it. So what we can do is array.from new array dot. So we give this new array length of 10. We ask its keys and then we create an array. So what this will essentially do is create an array that contains this. So no 8, 9. So 10 elements, just the indexes. So we have this array. And now we will use the map function to actually create a keyframe. So we can now calculate the length for at this index, and that will be our path length minus our step size times I. So this is the current point, starting from here, the current point on this path. So we start from the right. If we didn't subtract this, we would start from the left, but we want to start from the right. You will see why in a moment. And so this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So that's what we calculate here. And now we can actually get the points, the X and Y coordinates in the viewbox of this SVG path. Just like we had the path.getTotal length, we can also say let's current point is our path.get point at length current length. So imagine that this is our current length. Then we just want to ask, like, what is the X and the Y coordinate of this point? That's what we're doing here. And we can then use this to create a keyframe. Just as the keyframes in CSS, it's very similar, but here we can add some more dynamic keyframes. So return an object that contains the CSS properties that we want to change. So it's really very similar to this, but we just do it in JavaScript. So we return. So the property of a circle, because it's a circle we are going to animate. So we can get its X position. I don't know why this, okay. Oh, okay. There we go. So we can get its X position using the current point dot X, the Y position, so the CY, I guess it stands for a circle y position, so the current points dot y. We'll just give it a radius of 2. And actually, we don't really need to do this inside of every keyframe, but we'll do it just for now. We'll just use the color of our checkbox, which we gave the variable name of, let me check, checkmark color. Okay. So the circle that we will create has the same color as a checkmark color. So those are our keyframes. It will all get clear once we finish up. Now you have the frames, and then you have the options, which is so these are the keyframes, and then the options are analogous to the animation options. So it's like the delay, the duration, the easing function, and so forth. So it's really almost the same. So we can create our easing function. So we just use the same one, the ease in out. We can use our duration. Let's say no 300. I am not exactly sure. Oh, I forgot an assignment operator. So we got our keyframes and our options, and now what we can do is we can say circle.animate, and we pass in our keyframes and our options. So let's see what we have now. And that didn't work. Probably because of this typo. Hopefully that's the only mistake that I made, but I guess not. So we seem to have an error. Path length is not defined. So let keyframe this area dot. So I don't know why it didn't work. Okay, let me try and fix this issue and come back in a minute. Okay, so I think I found a mistake. Path length. I don't know why I had path length. This should be total length. Okay. So what we can see now is that we have this kind of circle that follows this path. Let me make it a bit bigger so it's a bit easier to see. And I'll also, for now, I'll make this transparent so it's easier to see. So as you can see, we have this circle and it makes the same move. It follows the path of our check mark. So that's another part of our animation. So one thing I do not want is if our checkbox wrapper has a class list checked. So I only want to do this if our checkbox is not checked. Otherwise, I'll just return, and I'm not interested in doing this move. So now you can see I should reverse that. So we get this ball effect. Now, this might look a bit weird because there's too much going on at the same time. So let's add some delays to our animation. So we'll add a slight delay to the drawing of our check mark. So first the ball will bounce, then our check mark gets drawn in the opposite direction, and then we get the little bounce effect. So let's see what that gives us. So I kind of like this effect. It has some nice movements in different directions, and it ends with a very satisfying bounce effect. So one last thing I would like to do is I would like to also animate the background of the check mark. It's a little bit boring right now. So we can create another. Actually, I think we can just reuse this animation. And let's make a hover effect. So if we hover over our check mark, let's let's give a bounce effect to our background as well. So that's a nice thing, because we wrote this animation, it's quite reusable. And so now when we hover over our check mark, we also get a nice little animation, some nice feedback that we are hovering over it. So one last thing I would like to do is on click, I also want to slightly, I don't know, maybe wiggle this checkbox a little bit, just because now it's just a check mark, but I would also like to make it more playful and animate this. So what we could do is let's maybe add a little bit of a rotation. Rotate check mark background. That's the name of our animation. And we'll overshoot this as well. So we will use 4 stages. So one is the initial, one is one direction, and then we overshoot it in the other direction. So maybe we can start with a bit of a rotation. And I kind of want to have it fade in as well. So let's do that. We'll start with no rotation and completely fade it out. And then we'll just rotate it a little bit. For example, 25 degrees, give it a bit of opacity. And now with the overshooting, we can rotate it in the other direction by giving it a negative amount. And because it's overshooting, we make this value a little bit smaller. So it makes a big move and then a smaller move, and then it settles down. So that's the idea. And at this point, we can just say that the opacity is already 1. And here we rotate back to our initial position. But in this case, our opacity just stays 1. And we'll play that when our check mark is checked. And I already forgot the name of our animation, so let's see what that gives us. It's nice, but it's kind of missing something. I think maybe if it like rolled in a bit from the sides, that could be a cool effect. So let's see if we gave it a translate. Let's say 10 pixels to the right and no pixels to the y-axis. So this is the x and the y-axis. And then I don't think we have to repeat it for every one, but it's okay. It's not a bad practice to do. So let's see what that gives us. Yeah, so that gives it a little bit more flair, but I think actually I really like the scale bounce effect, so I might layer that in here as well. So we start at scale. Well, we can make it grow just like we faded in. We can maybe start at scale 1, overshoot to the upside, maybe overshoot to the downside, and then settle on our full scale. So it should be 1. Let's see what that gives us. So yeah, I like it. It's quite dynamic. Now, in the real world, I don't think I would add this much animation, but actually I don't think it's too bad here. The general rule is you don't overdo animations because it gets distracting, and you want to only add animations on the. Typically, I like to only add animations when there's user interaction. So it's not distracting, and where the user is interacting, the focus should be, so it's fine to add some animation here. Now this is a bit over the top, but since this is like the primary interaction with our app, with the To-Do app, it should be satisfying to finish it to do. So yeah, I think for this use case, it's totally fine. So yeah, let's end here. I think that's a nice animation. Maybe in the next video we can add some animations to the button or to the to-do list. We'll see where we get from this point. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.